Welcome to Neural Nexus Podcast, where we explore the hottest topics shaping the world. Let's dive in.
All right, so Brad and Angelina, officially over. Brangelina. I mean, you know the names, right? You've seen all the headlines. But today, we're doing a deep dive into what really went down in one of Hollywood's, longest and messiest divorces ever.
Definitely messy.
We've got articles here, mostly from peoples.com, and they're announcing that after 8 years, the legal battle is finally done.
Wow. 8 years.
8 years.
Years of a lifetime. Seriously.
Especially in celebrity news cycles.
Right, exactly.
Things move so fast.
So what can this whole saga teach us about, these high-profile splits, the legal system, and maybe even, the illusion of happily ever after?
Right, the fairy tale ending.
Yeah, exactly, when you're in the spotlight.
Well, I think what's fascinating here is just how long this whole thing dragged on. I mean, to give you some context, most divorces, even really complicated ones, usually done in a year or two, maybe.
Yeah. This one went on for 8 years. It just shows you how complicated their finances were, how much was at stake emotionally, and, maybe even something about their personalities, too.
Yeah, I mean, 2016 feels like forever ago.
I know, right?
I remember everybody was just glued to their phones and computers when the news first broke.
Totally.
And this wasn't just any Hollywood couple splitting up. This was Brangelina, the power couple.
It just seemed like they had it all.
Right. They had the glamorous lifestyle, 6 kids. They seemed picture perfect. And then suddenly, bam, irreconcilable differences.
Yeah. I think it really pulled back the curtain on celebrity culture. We saw this couple that seemed totally unbreakable.
Right.
Dealing with the same messy stuff that regular couples go through.
Yeah.
Except it was all amplified by fame and money, and it really challenged the public's perception of them, I think.
Absolutely. It really showed the difference between their, carefully crafted public image and the realities of their life.
Yeah.
And things got complicated really fast. Remember, Jolie filed for divorce in September 2016, just days after that incident on the private plane.
Oh, right.
And she accused Pitt of being abusive towards her and the kids during that flight.
Right. And that incident changed everything. It went from what seemed like maybe a sad but amicable split to this big legal battle with these serious allegations.
Yeah.
But it's really important to remember that Pitt was never charged with any crime related to that incident.
Okay, yeah.
There were investigations, but ultimately Jolie chose not to press charges. So it raises this big question. How do we handle these really sensitive situations when they're happening under a microscope, in the public eye?
That's a good question.
How much weight should we give to accusations versus actual legal action, especially when you have kids involved? It's tough.
So imagine the media frenzy going on around them at this time. But then they do something surprising. They agree in 2017 to handle everything privately. Private judges, sealed records. That's not typical, is it? Especially for celebrities who, it seems like, they thrive on that public attention.
No, it's very unusual. It suggests that they were trying to control the story and keep their kids out of the spotlight as much as possible, but it also makes you think about power,
Oh, interesting.
They basically created their own little court system outside of the usual public scrutiny. So it raises questions about transparency and fairness, for sure.
Right.
But maybe it also shows that they genuinely wanted to protect their family. It's hard to say for sure.
Then, fast forward to 2019, they're declared legally single, but they're still not divorced. I don't get it. How can you be single but still so tied to your ex legally?
Right, like single but entangled. It's really because their lives and assets were so complicated. I mean,
Right.
We're not talking about just splitting a bank account here. We're talking fortunes, multiple properties, businesses.
Right.
Including, of course, that infamous Château Miraval.
Oh, yeah. Château Miraval, the $164 million French estate and winery. Here's where the money and the emotions get really messy. So in 2022, Jolie decides to sell her part of the estate. And Pitt was not happy at all.
Yeah, I bet not.
He sued her, saying they'd made an agreement to not sell without each other's consent.
I see. So this is where it goes from being a typical celebrity divorce to something much bigger, right? I mean, Château Miraval wasn't just a business for them.
Exactly.
It represented their past, their dreams, their family life. So for Pitt, Jolie selling her share probably felt like a huge betrayal, like she was cutting off their history together. It shows you how much emotion people attach to certain things, especially things tied to important memories and relationships.
And Jolie didn't just back down either. She countersued and she accused Pitt of waging a vindictive war against her.
Ah.
And she even said he was trying to take control of Miraval after they split. Strong words.
Yeah, definitely. And those accusations just added another layer of complexity to the legal battle. It became about control, about who gets to write the ending to their story. It makes you wonder, were those accusations just legal tactics, or were they driven by real feelings of anger and betrayal?
Right. Who knows?
Hard to say.
And this legal battle, it just went back and forth. Remember, in November 2024, Jolie won access to all these documents. Emails, texts, you name it. She said it would back up her abuse allegations and show that Pitt was trying to cover things up.
Right.
But then Pitt hits back, and he says he's got proof that they did have a written agreement about selling Miraval. Jolie denies it, of course. It's like a legal tennis match, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other.
It really shows you how these high-profile divorces can become these big public spectacles. The legal system, which is supposed to be about rules and procedures, becomes a stage for this very personal drama to play out. And the media attention, the public wanting all the details, just adds fuel to the fire.
Yeah, for sure. And the legal strategies, like digging up dirt on the other person, trying to control the story, it all becomes as important as the actual legal arguments.
It's like a game of chess almost.
Totally. But amidst all this, amidst all the legal fighting and public drama, one thing stayed consistent. Both Jolie and Pitt always said they wanted to protect their children's privacy.
Yes.
They really tried to keep custody arrangements and the kids' lives out of the media craziness.
That's important to remember. Because despite all their fighting, they did seem to agree on one thing: shielding their kids from the spotlight. It shows a certain level of maturity, I think. And maybe it means that they realized that as bad as the divorce was, it shouldn't define their children's lives.
Which makes you wonder, what impact did watching this 8-year saga have on those kids? They basically grew up with this divorce as a constant background in their lives.
It's hard to know for sure what's going on in their heads, of course.
Yeah.
But studies show that these high-conflict divorces, where the legal battles drag on forever and the parents are always at odds, they can have long-term effects on kids.
Really?
Yeah. Kids might end up feeling anxious, emotionally distressed, even have trouble building healthy relationships later on.
Wow. And we can't forget about the financial side of this whole thing. We're talking about a massive amount of money here. Dividing up assets like Château Miraval, that had to be a nightmare.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
High net worth divorces are a whole other level of complicated. It's not just about splitting a bank account. You have to untangle complex investments, businesses, properties in different countries.
Right.
It takes teams of lawyers and financial experts to figure out what all these assets are worth and make sure they're divided fairly.
I can't even imagine the legal bills. They must have spent a fortune.
Oh, I'm sure they did. These high-profile divorces are notoriously expensive. Lawyers, expert witnesses, court filings, travel expenses, it all adds up so fast, especially with this case being international.
So, after all of this, after 8 years, they finally reach a settlement. December 30th, 2024. Jolie's lawyer announces it's over. She describes Jolie as exhausted but relieved. Pitt's team, true to form, stays quiet. So, what do you think? Is this really the end of Brangelina? Or could there be more to come?
It's a big moment, for sure. Reaching a settlement shows they're willing to move on, that they want peace more than they want to keep fighting. But whether it means closure, that's another question. I mean, we don't know the details of the settlement. It's all confidential.
Right.
So we don't know the custody arrangement, how the finances were divided, or if there are rules about how they're supposed to interact going forward.
It's almost like a cliffhanger. We know the legal battle's over, but we still don't know about the emotional fallout or what the long-term consequences will be. I guess only time will tell.
Exactly. And that's why people are so fascinated by this case.
Yeah.
They want to know who won, who came out on top. But the truth is, in a divorce like this, where it was so complex and emotionally intense, there are no real winners or losers. Everyone involved probably went through a lot of stress, emotional pain, and spent a ton of money.
It just shows that even when you have fame and fortune, divorce is rarely simple or easy. It's messy, it hurts, and it can leave scars.
And it really makes you question your assumptions about celebrity couples. You know, it shows you that even behind the glamour and the perfect image, they're still human, with all the same vulnerabilities and flaws as everyone else.
Very well said. Okay, before we finish up this deep dive, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier. Despite all the drama and legal battles, Jolie and Pitt seem determined to keep their kids out of the worst of it.
That's a good point, and it's worth emphasizing. It suggests that even in the most bitter separations, parents can still agree on one thing: protecting their children's well-being.
Yeah, it makes you think about what their priorities were, even as their relationship is falling apart.
It shows a certain level of maturity and maybe even a recognition that their children's needs had to come before their own conflicts. It's a little bit of hope in the middle of all the wreckage.
You know, it's easy to get lost in all the drama, the accusations, the back and forth legal stuff. But we have to remember, at the center of all this is a family. And this family just went through a very public, very painful breakup. And just like any family dealing with divorce, there are kids trying to understand it all.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that behind the headlines and the perfect pictures, these are real people going through real emotions and trying to deal with a really tough situation.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Brangelina saga, I'm going to leave you with one last thought. Do you think this settlement means they finally found peace? Or is this just one chapter ending in a much longer, much more complicated story?
That's the big question, isn't it? I guess we'll have to wait and see. The legal battle is over, but the emotional journey probably isn't. Hopefully, this resolution gives them all a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to put their children first.
Well, it's been quite a ride going through this Hollywood saga. But that's what we do here on the Deep Dive. We go beyond the surface, beyond the headlines, and we explore the complexities underneath.
Because even in the world of celebrities, there are lessons to be learned, insights to be gained. And it reminds us that behind all the fame and money, there are human stories happening, just like ours.
We hope you learned something new today, maybe even question some of your own ideas. And remember, life, just like this divorce, is rarely black and white. It's full of nuances, contradictions, and complexities. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts open. And it makes you wonder, what impact did watching this 8-year saga have on those kids? They basically grew up with this divorce as a constant background in their lives.
Yeah. It's impossible to say for sure what they were thinking and feeling, obviously.
Right.
But there's a lot of research on high conflict divorces.
Mm-hmm.
And it suggests that when you have these long legal battles, when the parents are always fighting,
Mm-hmm.
it can have some lasting effects on the kids.
Really? Like what?
Well, they might experience more anxiety, emotional distress,
Mm-hmm.
and they might even have a harder time forming healthy relationships when they're older.
Wow, that's
Yeah, it can be tough.
really sad. And we can't forget about the money either.
Oh, yeah. The financial side of this is huge.
I mean, we're talking about a massive fortune here. Dividing up assets like Château Miraval, that had to be a nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. High net worth divorces are a whole other level of complexity. It's not just about splitting a bank account.
Yeah.
You've got businesses, investments, properties in multiple countries.
Right.
You need teams of lawyers and financial experts to figure out what everything is worth
Mm-hmm.
and then make sure it's divided fairly.
I can't even imagine the legal fees involved in all of this.
Oh.
Astronomical.
I'm sure it was incredibly expensive. High-profile divorces are just notorious for that.
Right. Fair.
You've got the legal teams, expert witnesses, all the court filings, the travel expenses. It adds up so quickly, especially when it's an international case like this.
So after all of this, 8 years of battling it out, they finally reach a settlement, December 30th, 2024.
Right.
Jolie's lawyer announces it's done. He says she's exhausted but relieved. Pitt's team, as always, they stay silent. So what do you think? Is this really the end of Brangelina? Or is there more to come?
It's a big step, that's for sure. Reaching a settlement means they're willing to move on, that they want to stop fighting.
Oh, okay.
But whether this means they found closure, that's hard to
Yeah.
say. We don't actually know what's in the settlement.
Yeah.
It's all confidential.
Right.
So we don't know anything about the custody arrangement, how the money was split up, or if there are any rules about how they can interact in the future.
It almost feels like a cliffhanger ending.
Yeah, a little bit.
We know the legal fight is over, but we don't know what the emotional fallout will be or what the long-term consequences are for any of them.
Right.
I guess only time will tell.
And that's what keeps people so interested in this case, I think. They want to know who won, who came out on top.
Right.
But in a divorce like this, one that was so complex and emotionally charged, there are no real winners or losers.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone involved has probably been through a lot. I mean, a lot of stress, emotional pain, not to mention the financial costs.
It just shows that even when you're rich and famous, divorce is never easy.
Yeah.
It's messy, it hurts, and it can leave scars.
And I think it makes you question your ideas about celebrity couples. It shows that behind all the glamour and the perfect image, they're just human with the same vulnerabilities and flaws that everyone else has.
Well said. Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier.
Sure.
Despite all the drama, all the fighting in court, both Jolie and Pitt really seem to want to protect their kids from the worst of it.
Yes, absolutely. It's important to highlight that. Even in a separation as bitter as this one was, there can still be a shared desire to protect the children.
It makes you wonder what that says about their priorities as parents, even as their relationship is falling apart.
It shows some maturity and maybe even a recognition that their kids' needs had to come before their own conflicts. It's a glimmer of hope in all this mess.
You know, it's easy to get lost in all the drama, the accusations, the back and forth legal stuff. But we have to remember, at the center of all this is a family.
Yeah.
And this family just went through a very public, very painful breakup. And just like any family dealing with divorce, there are kids trying to understand it all.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that behind the headlines and the perfect pictures, these are real people going through real emotions and trying to deal with a really tough situation.
So as we close out our deep dive into the Brangelina saga, I'm going to leave you with one last thought. Do you think this settlement means they've finally found peace? Or is this just one chapter ending in a much longer, much more complicated story?
That's the big question, isn't it? I guess we'll have to wait and see. The legal battle is over, but the emotional journey probably isn't. Hopefully, this resolution gives them all a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to put their children first.
Well, it's been quite a ride going through this Hollywood saga, but that's what we do here on the Deep Dive. We go beyond the surface, beyond the headlines, and we explore the complexities underneath.
Because even in the world of celebrities, there are lessons to be learned, insights to be gained. And it reminds us that behind all the fame and money, there are human stories happening, just like ours.
We hope you learned something new today, maybe even question some of your own ideas. And remember, life, just like this divorce, is rarely black and white. It's full of nuances, contradictions, and complexities. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts open.
Yeah, it really does make you think about their priorities as parents, even though everything was falling apart.
It does, yeah. And it's not something you always see.
Yeah.
It shows a real maturity, you know?
Like they knew that the kids' needs were more important than their own problems.
It kind of gives you hope.
It does, yeah.
You know, it's so easy to get caught up in all the drama,
Oh, yeah.
the accusations, the legal stuff. But at the heart of this, it's a family, you know? A family that's going through a really public, really painful breakup.
Right.
And those kids are trying to figure it all out.
Like any family dealing with divorce, it's tough on the kids.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Brangelina saga, I want to leave you with one last thought.
Okay.
Do you think this settlement means they've finally found some peace?
That's a good question.
Or is this just like closing one chapter
Right.
in a much longer, much more complicated story?
I think that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Only time will tell.
Yeah.
I mean, the legal battle is over, but
Yeah.
their emotional journey probably isn't.
Right.
Hopefully this settlement gives them a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to really put their children first.
Well, it's been a wild ride going through this whole Hollywood saga.
It has.
But that's what we do here on the Deep Dive, right? We go beyond the surface. We go beyond the headlines.
Yeah, we get into the nitty-gritty.
We explore all the stuff underneath.
Exactly.
Because even in the world of celebrities, there are lessons to be learned, insights to be found, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good reminder that behind all the fame and fortune,
Right.
these are just human stories happening just like ours.
At the end of the day, they're just people.
We hope you learned something new today. Maybe even thought about things a little differently.
Yeah.
And remember, life, just like this divorce,
Mm-hmm.
it's rarely black and white.
It's messy.
It's full of all these shades of gray, you know?
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts open.